Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to take a look at another budget watercolor set that may or may not be right for you. I love to have a good database of these different products that are out on the market because it can help you decide whether to try something new, try to save some money, or see if something new is actually something you already have just under a different label. And today we're going to take a look at the Artify 48 set of half pan watercolors. It comes in a very thin cardboard sleeve, which, you know, I'd rather them spend the money on the palette and the paint than the packaging, so that's fine with me. I would recommend that you save the back panel here. There is some just you know, tips on brush care because it comes with water brushes and gives you an idea, gives you some instructions on how to use it if you're not familiar with water brushes or watercolors. But you just might want to keep this in case you mix up your colors in order and you want to put them back in the way they came. I think that would probably be the only reason to keep that. But there's the outer packaging. And then this is the palette itself. It's pretty good sized. If I put it on my grid here, I can see that it is about 9¼ inches by 5¾ inches, just to give you an idea of the size. It's a pretty sturdy plastic, so it's not brittle. And the reason I didn't clean my palette, I just used it a few minutes ago, and I'll show you the painting that I did with that. I didn't clean it because I wanted to show you how well the paint spreads out on it and it doesn't bead up, because a lot of times with plastic palettes, and I don't know why some plastic does it and some does, but sometimes with a plastic palette the paint just beads right up and you can barely see what you're mixing. These, for whatever reason, this spread out really well, and it's also nice and sturdy and thick, and it's good for a plastic palette. I was pretty impressed. So the palette can go on your or the mixing area can go on your palette a variety of ways. You can have it go off to the right side or to the left side or in front of you like that. Now you could have it go back here as well, but then you're kind of covering up some of your paints. What I think this is designed for is to have like a small pad or a small block of watercolor paper up here, and you can set this on your lap and then you have that for painting. I think that's what this is designed for. It's very similar to the Koi pocket boxes. If you've ever had or seen the Sakura Koi watercolor sets, it's also got a lift out palette like that, and yellow sponges, and it looks very similar, almost like it's like they want it to look like that. This set comes with 3 water brushes. It comes with a 1/4 inch flat. The caps do post, which is nice. It comes with a standard, I would say, medium tip. It's probably about like a number 6, I would say, American sized round. And then it comes with like a really tiny one, which would be good for details, or if you're a rubber stamper, good for coloring in small images, or if you like to work in adult coloring books, if you have some that have watercolor compatible paper, you could do your details with that. I think that would work pretty well. Water brushes, I prefer regular brushes to water brushes, but you get 3. They're, you know, standard run-of-the-mill water brushes. The cost of this, I've seen it on Amazon for around $32. So, you know, I'm sure the price goes up and down. It usually does on Amazon, but that's what I've been seeing it on its own. And the price of the brushes, which we'll get into in a little bit, the price of this has been around $13, but they've had like 30% off coupons. But then I saw they had a bundle that had everything, had these brushes in this set for $32. So obviously that's the best deal if you want both of them. Otherwise you can do the other options. But we're going to look at this set. They also have a set of 24, which I assume are the same quality paints, just because the packaging is very similar, like the palette and everything's very similar. Sometimes with some of these newer companies that have come out with art supplies, if they have a different sized watercolor set, it's actually different paint. And I've run across that with a couple different brands. Like their set of 48 is different from their set of 36, is different than the set of 12. But it looks like these are the same as their smaller size. Now these have, the way these palettes are arranged is kind of interesting. It's kind of a new style that I've been seeing popping up lately. Derwent does this with their watercolor sets, or their, I should say, water soluble pan sets, where they have these like bricks of 6, and then each of these pans can come out. So you could put these in a metal palette if you prefer. You can also reconfigure your palette the way you want. Or if, say, you're a homeschool mom or you're an art teacher and you want to make up, like you want, there's like, look at this, there's like a lot of yellows, there's a lot of reds, there's a lot of blues. Like you can make up a bunch of primary sets and pass them out. you know, for your kids or your students or whatnot. So it's just a different way you can utilize the palette to make it customizable. Or you could just remove a bunch of these and just bring like 12 colors with you and use these other sections for storing other products you want to bring with you. I don't know how usable these smaller pieces would be, except for like maybe erasers, pencil sharpeners, and charcoal sticks or something like that, but it's definitely an option and something to consider, especially once you've used up your paint. Looking at the color palette here, I just did I made myself a little, that's not it, that's a different one we're going to compare it to. I just used just like my swatch stamp from Waffle Flower to stamp some grids. Now notice how these sections of 6 are flipped, so they don't line up perfectly, but it gives me a good idea of where everything is and the colors of everything. So one criticism I have of this palette, and it might be a bonus if you're like a mom with several kids that you're trying to outfit with paint, is that there's a lot of samey colors. So like you've got a cool yellow, you've got like 2 neutral yellows, you've got 2 warm yellows, you've got a couple almost identical oranges, you've got like 4 warm reds, 4 cool reds, then you've got 2 like a cobalt and an ultramarine that look almost identical. You've got 3 like phthalo light blues. This one's a little bit more turquoise. It might be a PB 16 versus a PB 15. You've got a Prussian blue that's very similar to the indigo there. You've got a couple kind of like sap green colors. There's a lot of like those 2 kind of like huntery greens are very similar. You've got 3 browns that are pretty similar. You've got 2 yellow ochres that are very similar. So I feel like the variety of the colorway here is not the best. And then you've got some colors that are really just kind of weak. And although I did use that color in a painting, and I think the tutorial is probably already up, that's usually a throwaway color, but I actually found it to be really good in a misty kind of sunrise painting I did. So I guess that's useful. But I did find like this is a difficult pink to use. It's probably very fugitive. This is a very weak lavender. But overall, I mean, the colors are good. You just get a lot of samey colors, which I guess is fine if you think you're going to use those colors up, and then you'll have replacements or ones you can substitute pretty easily. But if you're looking for variety, like if you're a card maker and you don't want to mix a lot of colors, you just want to have that variety to color your stamped images, I don't think this is the best choice, just because there's so many colors that are similar. And you're not going to go through gobs of paint if you're coloring stamped images. I would say this is definitely kind of like a homeschool parent pick, or a, if you're a school teacher and you want to get a couple of palettes you can kind of break up between students, that would work. But still, I don't know if that's the most efficient way to do it. But overall, if you're just like, no, I want to stick to the primaries and I like having those backups for when I run out, then yeah, that's a pretty good, that would be a pretty good assortment for you, I think. I'd say the palette is definitely reusable. It's very sturdy. You get 3 water brushes, and those can run into some money. They're decent. They're not, top of the line, but they're certainly not bottom of the line. They're, your average water brushes. So for $32, I guess I would compare it with other similar products and see what you like best. Now, one other flaw is that you can only fit 2 brushes in the little slot here, and you'd think, why would they include 3? They could have included 2 and have them fit, or they could make a bigger gap and be able to fit all 3. So I think that's kind of strange. That does kind of annoy me that they don't all fit in there, although I usually just take out all my water brushes and put them in a drawer with just my water brushes, because as a teacher, I'll just grab all my water brushes and pass them to students, and then pass out, watercolor palettes. I actually teach with, I have 20 of identical watercolor palettes I teach with, so I just throw all my water brushes in one drawer. But it closes up nice and compact. I can actually keep my swatches in there if I want to. And that's kind of nice. I mean, that way if the paint surface is still like wet, I just put that down. I'd wipe off the mess, obviously, and I could put my swatch in there and close it and be on my way. It is nice and sturdy. I don't think it's going to get brittle and crack, so that's nice. It may yellow with time, as plastic does, but I have no problem with the palette. I'm glad that it doesn't beat up, and I'm pretty happy with it. Now, looking at some of the mixes you can get from this is where I was actually really excited here, because I decided to do a few different primaries. I did a cool primary here, so I used the cool yellow. I used, I think I used this cool red. Yeah, I used that cool red. And I used that cool blue, I believe. And I got a beautiful violet. I got a really nice orange, actually. And I got a beautiful green, and then mixed them together, got a nice gray. Then I took the warm primaries, which always look a little murkier because warmer colors are always, they mix a little less clean. I used ultramarine blue. I used, I think like this warm yellow, which is probably like a gamboge or an Indian yellow. And then I used this warm red, I believe, or maybe that one. It was one of them. I mean, they're so very similar. I probably use that one because that's a little bit more red, or that one. I don't know. They're both very similar. And then I got some like an eggplant. I got an earthy olive green. I got a beautiful orange. Then I used a neutral primary where I did yellow ochre, Indian red, and I think I did Prussian. I either did Prussian blue or indigo. I think I did Prussian blue. And I got some beautiful tones there. And then I did a secondary color mix where I did Viridian, which I purposely chose more transparent secondary colors. So I used Viridian, I used violet, and I used, I think I used that orange. I think I used that orange. I think one of those oranges, and I got some really beautiful colors that way too. So they mix really well. They're good quality paints, but you might already have these in your stash because these I am like 99% sure are Superior brand, or the paints that are made by the company Superior, and they private label for lots of other brands. Like they do the fan palettes and the folding palettes. The other folding palette that Artify did, I'm gonna say allegedly because I don't work for any of these companies, but it's the same quality as those. It's at least the same quality. I think it's identical. But if you have the Art Whale set of pans, it's gonna be the same paint. This is the Art Whale collection versus the Artify, just so you can see. It's got some of the same colors, but I feel like the Art Whale does have a better variety because it's got like almost like a fake cobalt teal color and like a powder blue. They left out the weak lavender, which I'm fine with. They gave you different purples, like stronger purples. But overall, it's a very similar, very similar quality, if not identical quality. I'll show you that palette in comparison, just so you can see. So this would be a metal tin versus the plastic palette. But I found them to be very comparable, if not identical, to those paints. Another paint set that this seems probably the closest to would be the Art & Fly, this set of 72. Even down to like the sheen on the glazes that I got with those. So if I look at the Art & Fly swatch here, the colors are very, very similar. Probably the closest ones that I've seen. But of course, this is 72 colors, so it's got more variety. Of course, it's got a lot of samey colors because there's 72 of them, but it's also got some neons and some golds and whatnot. But I found the sheen and the whole texture of the pans, right down to the cracking. When they dry, they do get a little bit of cracking on it. So does the other one. Now the Artify has individual half pans, which is more convenient than having everything just in a molded palette like this. But again, this looks a lot like a koi palette, and I feel like these were designed to look like the koi palettes, and I feel like the ones in the tin were almost designed to look like the Paul Rubens palettes. And other artists have come to that conclusion as well. I'm not the first person to say that. It's just kind of an observation that I made with paints that I believe are made by the Superior Paint Company, but nevertheless, they're decent paints. I feel like they're worth the price. They're just very similar. So if you have one of those other brands, Artsy is another one, and any of the folding fan palettes, I just feel like you're probably getting the same paint, just in a different packaging. They all run about the same price, so that's not that big of a deal, but it's just definitely something to consider. So I just did this quick landscape. It took about 20 minutes. I filmed it, so it's probably on my channel already. I found the colors just mix really well. They behave like watercolors. I don't feel like you're going to be hindered by using this watercolor set, especially if you want to get it for like a newer artist. I don't think they're going to be hindered by it. And I like the idea that you could actually take one of those little 6-packs, and you could put in like a split primary palette, maybe take another one of those 6-packs, put in like yellow ochre, burnt umber, just kind of keep it really limited and put the rest away. I like that. So that's why it makes me think it might be nice for teachers or homeschoolers. I did just a rainbow gradient. The colors blend into one another really well. They're solid paints. They behave, they do what they're supposed to do, and I've got no qualms with that. I've got no qualms with the quality at all. I do feel like you can find that quality of paint a little bit cheaper sometimes, so just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at these paint sets. There are some good paint sets, good budget paints, and there are bad budget paints, and these are good budget paints. They're not my favorite. My favorite budget paints are still the pretty excellent paints, but and those are cheaper too, but these aren't bad. These aren't bad at all. So I thought we'd also take a look at the brushes and maybe do a little bit of, you know, demonstrations with them, because you're probably curious about these. Now these, however, I think these are a steal of a deal. For 10 bucks to get 12 paintbrushes, and honestly for 10 bucks to get the 3/4 inch cat's tongue brush. Now I'm not going to keep this wallet. I don't typically keep the, well, I'm not going to keep it for that. I might use it for something else, but I'm not going to keep it for keeping my brushes in because I find that very inconvenient. Although it is nice for storing or if you have to travel with it because the tips won't get bent. So that is something you might want to keep. The packaging, I think it's got a reclosable zipper. Yeah, it's got like a Ziploc type top there. So definitely keep this if you travel with your brushes or you want to stick them in like in your backpack for school or whatnot, because that will keep them from getting bent. But otherwise, if you're a studio artist, you probably won't find that much use in keeping them in their package like that. But it is nice for keeping the tips straight. I found these to be excellent. For watercolor and gouache. I would not recommend these, even though they say for like all medium. No brushes are for all medium. Yes, sure, technically you can use them for whatever medium you want, but it's rarely the best situation. These are great for watercolor or gouache. They're more absorbent. It's going to hold a lot of water, which is what you want for watercolor, but not what you want for acrylics. And I don't find these to be that. I mean, you could use some of the smaller ones for details in oils. I suppose that would be fine, but I would definitely say these are a watercolor or gouache brush. I'm just gonna move. I like to keep the palette in front, and I like to have my palette like that, so I can actually put my color chart there, because with watercolors it is good to have a swatch chart, because if you look at like these dark greens, the dark blues, it can be very difficult, the browns and blacks, it can be very difficult to figure out what you have with watercolor, especially if it's a transparent watercolor, because they look a lot darker in the pan. So I found these brushes to be lovely. It's nice, you got a nice, I'd say it's about a 3/4. They say it's a 1 inch. You know, I do say the measurements are a little bit off. They say that's 1 inch, this is 3/4. Their 3/4 cat's tongue, I would say is more like a 5/8. So that's definitely not 3/4. So the sizing is a little bit off. I do find that to be fairly standard with your Chinese brushes, and also when you go into like a when you go from short handle to long handle brushes, I find that the sizing is usually way different. So just keep that in mind. These are smaller than what they say. That's not 1 inch. This brush I really like. I would actually buy the pack for this brush. These were sent to me for review purposes for free. I'm not paid to do this video. I'm not expected to do a good review, but I just wanted to let you know that. But I mean, look how responsive that is. I love that you can get really wide strokes, you can get thin strokes. I did most of that landscape I showed you with this brush. These brushes get better the more you use them, especially cat's tongue brushes, because sometimes, and I can show you here, sometimes with cat's tongue brushes, they will be a little too like thick at the end. But you don't want to snip them, because if you snip them, you could mess them up. But so you want to just kind of wear them down a little bit, and eventually they'll get softened up and they almost get like flagged and frayed, and then they come to a beautiful point with watercolor because you have all that water in there. So just use them. The more you use your cat's tongue brush, the more you're going to like it if it's a synthetic. I'm not sure with like a real fur brush, but with synthetics, the more you use them, the better you're going to love them. They're going to get more absorbent the longer you go. I also really like the large rounds here. I don't use small rounds all that often, but the large rounds I really, really like. Another thing I want to mention about this, I was just using this palette so it was nice and activated. These particular paints are better to pre-activate. Some, they kind of too soupy if you pre-activate them, but I feel like the superior ones really need that pre-activation. But look at that response you get on that round brush. This is no, see, this is weird. They call this a number 7 round. I think in your typical short-handled American sizes, this would be more like a 10. So I would kind of disregard the sizes on the brushes, but you do get a really nice variety, because this larger one here is probably, let's say, equivalent to an 8 to a 10. And then you've got this nice big Cat's Tongue. Those two are going to be so versatile. You've got a nice 3/4 inch flat. You've got a smaller flat. I love to use flat brushes for like doing waves, you know, because you can work them like horizontally, doing like waves in the ocean. And rocks and whatnot. I mean, just these 4 brushes alone, I think, are worth the price. And then you do get a liner, which is really great for doing grasses. This is a really nice overall set, I would have to say. And a liner brush, it's got long bristles, but they're skinny, so it holds a lot of paint and water, so you don't have to reload a lot. So if you're doing fur or grasses, anything like that, you can keep on keeping on for quite a while. So I would say absolutely, totally recommend, 5 out of 5 stars. The brushes, the paints, and this is probably me being a little bit biased because I've seen this quality of paint so many times, and sometimes it's way cheaper than this. I'm kind of, I would say probably like 3.5 out of 5 stars, just because, like, there's a lot of competition out there right now. It really takes a lot to knock my socks off with a watercolor set. They're definitely not bad. I like the palette's nice and sturdy. However, the Artsy set of 24 has a more well-rounded like set of colors, and it's $15, between $15 and $20. And I think it would be easier to learn on that because you don't have a bunch of extra colors, and it also takes up less space. So I mean, that's also my preference. I prefer a metal tin, you know, to a plastic palette. It's, you know, that's personal preference. I like how this doesn't beat up. I mean, here you can see that wet paint. It's spreading out. It's all spreaded out. It's all spreaded out. I can see what I'm doing. I can mix a color. I could take, I'll do some ultramarine blue. I'll make a violet. You know, I can see how that color looks. I'm not like, it's not beating up and I can't tell what it is. I can see what I have there, which is really nice. The colors you can see blend into each other really well. There's not a lot of like cauliflowering, which is usually more the paper than the paint, to be honest. But here's that awful, really weak lavender, which is kind of a waste. Honestly, it's kind of a waste of a color. It barely shows up. I mean, what would you use that for? I don't know. But you can easily pop out pans and replace them with something else if you don't like it. So, I mean, it's definitely not bad. Maybe the 24 set's a better value because there's probably fewer samey colors. But I do like having all this area. So, you know, you definitely could reconfigure it, recycle the palette for something else when you're done. Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Maybe, you know, watch the price if it's, you know, it's equivalent to any of the Superior made watercolor sets. Now, I can't tell you for sure that these are made by Superior, or for sure that they're exactly the same as the Artsy or the Art Whale or the Art and Fly, but just going by my experience and what it was like to paint with them and how they look after they dried, they got that cracking surface on them, I would say it probably is. So if you already have one of those sets of paints, there's probably not a point in getting another one unless you really love it and you're almost out of it and you want to replenish it. So that's my my review of the Artify watercolor brushes and 48 set of half pans. I hope you enjoyed it. I like these paints. There's nothing wrong with them. I would be more than happy to teach with these. You know, I don't think my students would have any problem learning with these. So there you have it. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoy art supply reviews. And until next time, happy crafting!